Hello, and welcome to my presentation of an analysis of presidential education policy featuring the policies of Bill Clinton. Out of all of the issues at the forefront of the political landscape, education stands forward as possibly the most important, as it is, at its core, the mechanism by which we as a country keep going. Through the education of our country's youth, we ensure our survival into the future. Like I said, my presentation will focus on Bill Clinton, and I will give a brief biography of President Clinton, in addition to discussing his policies. President William Jefferson Clinton, née Blythe, was born on October 19, 1946, in Hope, Arkansas. After completing his high school studies, President Clinton earned a Bachelor of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University. He was a Rhodes Scholar and studied at Oxford University before earning his law degree at Yale University, where he would meet his future wife, Hillary Rodham. The Clintons have one child, Chelsea, born in 1980. After teaching law at the University of Arkansas, Clinton made an unsuccessful bid for Congress. However, 2 years later, he was elected to the post of Attorney General of Arkansas and then Governor of Arkansas, where he served for a total of 12 years. It's important to note that his support of education really started with his state-level service as the governor. He garnered national attention for his commitment to improving the quality of education in the United States, particularly in Arkansas. He won election to the presidency in 1992 and again in 1996. And despite his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, he left office with historically high approval ratings for the job he had done as the president. Even now that he is no longer the president, he is still active with his work in the Clinton Foundation, which, among other initiatives, takes special interest in education on a global scale. The literature discusses several important underlying principles that can be seen through the president's, or through Bill Clinton's educational policy. The first of these is that the top level of government should be a system enabler, not a director. And what this basically means is that the highest levels, e.g. the federal government, should enact policies that enable the lower levels to do their work. So the directors of education should be at the state and local level and are supported and enabled to do their jobs effectively by the federal government. Next, his education policy has a think globally but act locally kind of vision for the future. So technology, as I'll discuss later, was a big push for Clinton because the internet was just getting started and he wanted to bring that into classrooms. So because this is, leading and adding to the globalization of our world and the work that we do. So by thinking globally and acting locally, we are allowing students to learn how to live and work and contribute to this globalized culture. And finally, measurable goals. As with every policy, measurable goals are important because they are, the marker. They let you know that, you've done a good job. And so that was obviously important. And one of the biggest and the first policies enacted by the president is literally a list of goals, and we'll discuss that a little bit more later. Some of the important features of the president's policy includes national policy leadership, and that sort of feeds into just a moment ago when I talked about the highest levels should be enablers, not necessarily directors. So when we talk about national policy leadership, we're not necessarily talking about the federal government, but we may be talking about groups of states that are grouping up to work with initiatives, policymakers who are supporting states or volunteer organizations or national organizations that are supporting education at the national level and working with states on implementing those kinds of policies and programs in their own jurisdictions. That's kind of what we're talking about when we talk about national policy leadership as opposed to federal leadership. The state's role in education is, again, made even more apparent through Clinton's policies, because the policies have that firm belief of the highest level should be the enabler and not the director. So he's really leaving it up to the states to direct how they go about accomplishing these goals, but also providing lots of support in the way of programs and funding, etc. Policy coherence. So we see that his policies overall are easy to understand, they're laid out well, and they, make it easier for states to understand what their responsibilities are when it comes to, following with federal policy and using those programs and services effectively. One of the first issues President Clinton had to tackle in the educational policy landscape were standards of academic quality in the curriculum and holding schools accountable for the results. At the time of his inauguration in 1992, test scores were on the decline. Few states had standards in core subjects or even a core curriculum at all. Only about 20% of impoverished institutions were being granted Title I funds. So there was a lot to do. The Goals 2000 Educate America Act was enacted, and it lists out the specific policy goals that President Clinton wanted to address. Many people have criticized him for being too ambitious because he only gave himself 8 years to accomplish all of this stuff, and as we all know, it can be quite difficult to measure whether or not legislation has had any effect in such a short amount of time. I recently read that scholars are still unsure if the No Child Left Behind Act has made any impact on the educational policy landscape, on real measurable changes in the classroom. So that can kind of be a downside of what Clinton set out to do. However, I do think that these goals are all important and need to be addressed. So firstly, all children in America will start school ready to learn. The high school graduation rate will increase to at least 90%. All students will leave grades 4, 8, and 12 having demonstrated a competency over challenging subject matter, including English, math, science, foreign languages, civics and government, economics, art, history, and geography. And every school will ensure that all students learn to use their minds well, so that they may be prepared for responsible citizenship, further learning, and productive employment in our nation's modern economy. United States students will be the first in the world in mathematics and science achievement. Every adult American will be literate and will possess the knowledge and skills necessary to compete in the global economy and exercise the rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Every student in the United States will be free of, every school in the United States will be free of drugs, violence, unauthorized presence of firearms, and alcohol. Will offer discipline environment conducive to learning, and every school will promote partnerships that will increase parental involvement and participation in promoting the social, emotional, and academic growth of children. So lots of goals there in that act, and even more goals to come with future legislation that will, appear later on in his presidency. Sort of along with that first, policy goal, standards and accountability, comes increasing the number of, quality teachers that we have. The Clinton administration, again, in line with overall policy goals outlined in the Goals 2000 Educate America Act, began the class size reduction initiative that was designed to help higher population areas hire qualified teachers, more qualified teachers, that is, resulting in smaller class sizes, supporting student success in their early years. Along this same vein, the Troops to Teachers program served a dual role, staffing schools with qualified, high-quality educators, and also providing employment to veterans. Further, we can see more than $567,000 for initiatives, $567 million for initiatives aimed at increasing educator quality, that include teacher development, recruitment, retention, expanding teachers to troops to other mid-career professionals, training early childhood educators. So the Clinton administration really worked for increasing the number of highly qualified teachers that we had in the classroom. The Clinton administration also supported the National Board for Professional Teaching Standards, which trains teachers, and their numbers increased and ended up with more teachers with degrees in math and English that were teaching math and English, as opposed to a teacher having a degree in art and then being certified in English. So lots of help there for quality educators. Before the Clinton administration's investiture, the most complex technology the average American classroom had would have been an overhead projector powered by a light bulb and mirrors. Computers were found in only the most affluent areas, and really then in only administrative offices. In 1993, only 3% of classrooms had computers, and only 35% of public schools had internet access. And without the opportunity to learn and become proficient in the use of what is now common technology, risked leaving a generation without the knowledge and skills required to function in a modern global society. So the Clinton administration, understanding the importance of educational technology and the need for students to have equitable access to the learning experiences that set them up for future successes, they established the Technology Literacy Challenge Fund to assist schools with upgrading their information technology and educational technology infrastructures. The fund was also used to gain access to the internet and brought more computers into the classroom, as well as providing the necessary technology training to teachers. Between 94 and 99, 65% of classrooms in the U.S. had internet access, and by 1993, our investment in educational and learning technologies had risen to a height of over $800 million. The path to higher education. So attending an institution of higher education is in essence the American dream. Going to college, getting a job, the white picket fence, the house, it's all part of it. But the dream does not always consider how difficult it actually is to attain. In 1992, only 44% of low-income graduates were able to continue their educations at an institution of higher learning. So to combat this, we have several different programs. Firstly, Gear Up, which provides early sustained intervention and financial help to disadvantaged students through concerted college prep and advising initiatives. Additional funding for the TRIO programs, approximately $340 million, that again assists disadvantaged and minority students to become academically ready for college. The Advanced Placement Incentive Initiative served the purposes of increasing quality education and encouraging students to engage with more challenging coursework. This extends even today, where we have students taking AP exams and earning college credit in lieu of actually taking the class at a college. Understanding that education is a process and higher education at least, shouldn't not just be considered in the context of high school seniors going off to college. The Clinton administration also put investment into early childhood programs that offered enrichment experiences during the summer and after schools for school-age children. The cost of higher education has always been a concern, particularly in recent years, and pushes at the institutional level to make higher education more accessible to students have been mildly successful even today. For example, open educational resources to decrease the cost of textbooks. The Clinton administration attempted to alleviate some of these strains because in 1992, 57% of students did not benefit from federal student aid programs like grants and loans. In the grandest investment in higher education since the 1944's Servicemen's Readjustment Act, also known as the GI Bill, President Clinton created additional scholarships and tax credits that benefited millions of families with regard to higher education expenses. This resulted in lower interest rates on federal loans, as well as expanding work-study programs, increasing the Pell Grant Award. All of this led to decreased numbers of defaults on student loans, increased number of students who benefited from federal financial aid to nearly 60% of college-going students. So we can see lots of help in the form of, breaking down those barriers and really helping students. So just a quick concluding thought on Bill Clinton's educational policy. If I could point out the single most important feature of Clintonian educational policy, it would be that Clinton didn't simply throw one dart at the dartboard and call that a good game. He set forth many initiatives and scaffolded them so that they hit at multiple levels. He treated education as a lifelong learning process, a work in progress, because as our country changes, as the world changes, the way in which we educate the future of that country needs to change as well. So if I could point out, just one big thing, it would be that it was very holistic in that it considered education from all levels, as well as not just thinking for the present, but thinking for the future. Thanks for listening to my presentation.